A cross-generational workforce is commonplace now. How do we navigate these different generations? Hi, I'm Leah Woodford of SmartFem and Friends, and with me today is Brad Szollose, a cross-generational expert, speaker, and author of Liquid Leadership. Hey Brad, welcome to the show. How are you?
Thank you, Leah. Thanks for having me.
So Brad, why are millennials getting such a bad rap?
Excellent question, and that's the number one question I always get. First of all, millennials are misunderstood completely. I've been working in this generational space for almost 20 years now, and I gotta tell you, people still haven't figured it out. But this generation, I've seen them in the perfect environments where they're getting flexible hours, they can work remotely, they have their lunches paid for, and they can do whatever they want. They can take vacations, things like that.
Wear yoga pants.
Yes, wear yoga pants. And they still leave as a group. And how was it for baby boomers? If we didn't like our job, we just sat in the corner and complained, and we type out our resume and we go, you know, this place is horrible and I'm gonna get out of here. And then 5 years goes by and we're still not out of there. And then we're like, you know, I'm really upset. I'm gonna get my resume together. And then we're like, you know, I have a mortgage and I have kids, and we don't leave. We stay loyal. Millennials still, to this day, will get up and leave. And it isn't just the management side of everything with millennials. They won't buy traditional products. They won't go to events sometimes that marketing experts have planned for months, and they don't show up. And they can't figure out this generation. So because they can't figure out this generation, guess what they're doing now? They're focusing on the next generation, Generation Z.
So Brad, why do you think we have this generational divide?
Let's go back in time, Leah. How was your father? Was your dad tough?
Oh my God.
Yes, my father.
Yes, militant.
Right, my father was tough. And if you go back to the 70s, this idea of child-centric parenting started to show up. Also, toys started to change. The interactive world started to happen right around 1977. 1984, it really took off. But if you're a baby boomer, you might remember this. Remember this? This was a GAF Viewmaster. This was the most interactive device that a baby boomer could use. This was an interactive slideshow. And you know what was horrible about this? If the sun went down and the power went out, you couldn't use it. Now, I'm the cusp baby boomer. And what does that mean? Well, you have the baby boomer like my stepbrother. He was 12 years older than me, and he was worried about being drafted to Vietnam. I'm a cusp boomer. When I reached the same age, I was worried about getting home in time to see the ABC after school special. So there's a very big difference there, but we were all lumped into the same generation. And for those of you who are watching, think about this from your childhood. I'm the generation that was raised with lawn darts, you know, real lawn darts. If you don't know what the connection is between a pencil and a cassette, then you weren't there. And 8 tracks, how long did that last?
Not long.
Right. So we had a software upgrade when you were a baby boomer. You got a 45 album and you got that little plastic clip you had to put in the center. That was a software upgrade for a baby boomer. And a hardware upgrade for a baby boomer was bigger speakers. So fast forward to 1984, and all of a sudden more robust video games started coming into the households. And these took years to solve, multiple layers, and you had a new generation that was trained completely different in business skills. And they learned how to interact as a team, look for people who have a specific skill set and work with that team. And if you don't have that skill set, they get rid of you. Leadership is rotational. And by the way, you don't read a box when you play a video game. You don't read the directions on the box to figure out how to play that game. You know, Monopoly was a good example from our generation. You remember playing Monopoly?
I do.
Right.
It's one of my favorites.
Right. So you had to read all the rules, and then the game always ended the same way. Somebody would get upset, flip the board because they lost. They didn't buy enough. They were always paying rent on some boardwalk. Well, you now have a new generation that was taught to make mistakes, push against, find out what those rules are by playing the game. So boomers were taught if you make one mistake, your career is over. But this next generation was taught mistakes are the only way to learn. And now you're looking at two different generations. you think our brains might work differently? Maybe a little bit more complex? And that's the huge difference. I mean, it's a generational difference, but it's not like any other, simply because this next generation was raised completely differently.
So Brad, all these wonderful toys have indoctrinated these kids to live online, and now they don't have the soft skills that's needed to work in today's corporate America.
Absolutely. But think about it for a second. When we were punished and sent to our rooms, we had to sit there and read a book. That was it. Now a new generation is sent to their room and they're punished and they're like, yeah, I'll come out when I'm done, hitting 300,000 points. So their toys were highly interactive. So they didn't have to develop skills like, I have to look you in the eye and actually speak with you. And now, not all millennials are like this. I don't want anybody to sit here and say, well, millennials are this way and boomers are this way. It's not that. These are clues, not boxes to fit people into. Because I've met boomers who act like millennials, like myself, and millennials who act like boomers. And Generation X is kind of like Sweden. They're right in the middle. They know each generation and they can work within both. But now Gen X is coming up at the management positions and they're not taking the reins so quickly. So we have a whole generational divide taking place in all these companies, and it really goes back to how they were raised as children. Child-centric parenting was a very big ideology that started to be talked about by all the experts. Whether it was Carl Rogers or it was Dr. Spock, they started to say, you don't paddle a child, you treat them special and let them find their innate skills. And my father, who is the first generation of Hungarian immigrants in the United States, when he heard about child-centric parenting, my dad was a doctor of chiropractic medicine, so he had some authority, and he gave it his stamp of approval, and he said, this is a load of crap. And most parents did back then. You remember? It's like, what are you talking about? Kids would come home and go, I can call the police on you. They're like, well, you better do it right, because when I get home, we're going to paddle you. That all shifted into children now could have this extended childhood. There were no boundaries. They weren't paddled. They weren't told there was right and wrong. And they got awards based on self-esteem. We want you to feel good first rather than having skills to survive in the real world. So I'm sure a lot of you have heard some of this, you get a trophy. You were last to win. Here, honey. That's a good thing and a bad thing on many levels, because you now have young millennial women who don't have what the boomer women had in the back of their head, which was dad going, you can't do that, you're a girl. Now millennial girls, they've had their fathers in the back of their mind telling them, you can do it, baby, you can do it, go. And so they don't have that voice of limitation. And I'm sure a lot of people watching today, they'll realize that the millennial young adult, from 36 on down to 21, 18, things like that, their self-esteem isn't wrapped up in proving their dad's wrong. Their self-esteem is, I can do this. I know I can do this. So it's a different paradigm in that generation's mind that's going on.
But the other thing, it feels like Peter Pan syndrome. Because yes. We have a 10-year study now. These kids are failing to launch. We just saw in the news, we have a 30-year-old suing his parents because they want him to leave the house.
Well, do you know what a grup is?
I do not.
That is a Star Trek term, my geeks out there. That is a Star Trek term for when Captain Kirk and the crew came to this planet and they discovered there were these young children playing and they were 200 years old. And as soon as they started to go through puberty and cross over into becoming a teenager, they were called a grup, which is short for grown-up. Well, that's a term now that's being used for 40-year-olds who are riding skateboard or want to take their children who are 10 or 11 to a concert to see Boston live, things like that. So our boundaries have shifted from, well, in your 20s, you need to prove yourself. And in your 30s, you probably want to establish yourself and get some management and buy a house. And in your 40s, you're going to raise kids. 50s, you're going to get that corner office. You're going to be managing stuff. That's all gone. The woulda, coulda, shoulda of The boomer hierarchy that we had to work our way up through no longer exists. That pyramid of at 20 you're supposed to do this, and at 30 you're supposed to do this, and at 40 you're supposed to do that, it's flattened now. And that's why you see young CEOs running billion-dollar corporations now. And that's why you see 40-year-olds going off to write the great American novel. There's no defined boundaries for age anymore.
You know, you bring up an excellent point now. Let's talk a little bit about ageism.
Yes.
You know, because we're dealing with a multi-generational workforce. And, you know, it used to be you were a young kid, you knew nothing. Now you've got a 20-something-year-old that's managing a boomer. Mm-hmm. How on earth do you do that?
It's very interesting. If you look on any job application, they say they do not discriminate against race, creed, color, religion, all these things. There's one thing not on there: age. They can legally discriminate against you for age. It's the big elephant in the room nobody's talking about. And here's what's been going on, the dirty little secret that's been running around. You are seeing 50-somethings competing for the exact same jobs that 20-somethings are competing for. And the 50-somethings are being pushed out. And there's this ideology that's running around where I can get a millennial for a lot cheaper to do all this work, and I just need them to do the tech stuff. Well, guess what? You're missing out on something that's incredibly powerful, because a lot of boomers are not these, I'm going to use one of my dad's terms, they're not these dumb idiots who don't know anything about technology. I mean, look at us.
Right.
We use technology all the time. I'm on Facebook Live. I use LinkedIn a lot. So why are we getting this stereotype just because you're having a little bit of gray hair show up? And that's the thing that I believe a lot of corporations are missing out on. Now, in other countries, it's a little different. You're older, you have this amazing experience that we need. That's the way a lot of these companies look for people who have that experience. Like in Germany, they're not going to kick you out because you're older. They need you. You know, there are plants, BMW plants over in Germany have gotten rid of millennials, use millennials in the sales rooms, but use the boomers in the construction plants. Because if I have 100 boomers, I know I can take the field. You know, if I have an army of 100 boomers, I can do anything with them. But with millennials, if I have 100 millennials, I have to persuade them, because they've been taught to be independent thinkers, to think outside the box. Their talents are important. They need to speak up and speak out, things like that. So it's a little different in the behavioral paradigms of each generation. Like I always tell the corporations I work with, what motivates a baby boomer will never motivate a millennial or a Gen Xer.
Well, you know, what's really interesting about this is we're talking about the millennials, but what I've seen, you know, I've raised my kids, now I'm working on my husband's children, but, you know, they were indoctrinated into the tech world, and they all think they're going to be the next Mark Zuckerberg. And they put everything in that. They want to start at the top. I lead a whole bunch of millennials with the magazine, and they all think that, you know, just show up, wear your yoga pants, and there's this sense of entitlement. Can we talk about that?
Absolutely. Well, that's a misinterpretation. You have a generation, and like I said, I love millennials because they bring a breath of fresh air, but they are causing disruption. They don't know they're supposed to know their place in a company. That's where the disruption is taking place. They walk in with a master's degree, 24 years old, 28 years old, and they believe they can sit down with you and I and just talk. You know, we're on equal level, we're peers. And when this first started to happen back in the 90s, you had young people that were coming right out of college, first or second job, and they wanted to meet the CEO at a company and say, hey, Chet, I'm going to show you how to run this place because I had a business degree. And it started to drive everybody crazy, because it's like, wait a minute, you're supposed to come in at the bottom, work your way up, and then you might be able to talk to the CEO when you get to this level, and you will be 40 years old. This shocked every corporation around the world, because this was happening globally. They'd walk right in, they say, hey, I'm going to show you how to run this place. Or, and a lot of people have had this happen in interviews, the head of HR is sitting there, and they're sitting back, the interviewer and the interviewee, and they look up and they're like, how long did it take you to get into that position? They're like, oh, 16 years. What are you, a slacker? I'm going to do it in 4. And so everybody's like, are you kidding me? So this was causing disruption, all because you go back to childhood, you have a generation whose mom and dads looked them right in the eye and had adult conversations with them as if they were peers, not parents. My father was a benevolent dictator in my home.
Mine too.
Right, and he had the speech. Everybody had the speech from their dad. It's like, I am your father, I am not your friend. When I tell you to get out of bed, you put your work clothes on. When I say jump, you ask me how high. Maybe when you hit about 35, I will find you interesting enough to have a beer with you. Until then, we got work to do. And every boomer knows that speech,
Right.
okay? And that got shifted into this crazy way of speaking to children. It's like, hey, honey, don't get up. It's only 10:30. I know you were out late last night, but your dad and I have a question for you, and that is, should we get a divorce? What do you think, honey? You know, and some of you are laughing at home, but you did this because the experts told you to raise your kids this way. And now we're shocked that the hierarchy was flattened in the household. Parents became peers, concierges, time management experts, driving everybody to soccer games, karate classes, dance lessons, French lessons, all these experiences. As soon as the kid looked like he might like soccer, we spent $400 to buy all the equipment. And then we were shocked when they had 12 years of this. They went to college and they were listened to every day. Everybody was hanging on the edge of everything they were saying. And they'd walk right into the corporate office and they'd say, hey, we're going to show you how to run things better. What happened when you were 25, Leah? Was your boss listening to everything that came out of your mouth, telling you you were a genius and you were amazing? No, it never happened. So I don't want anybody to judge us as good or bad, but this is what took place. You have a generation now that has a specific skill set that we need. But we've removed huge amounts of the disciplines that made boomers successful, like getting up at 5:30 in the morning, listening to your boss, finding a mentor, working your way up the ladder. We removed all that and we looked them in the eye and said, follow your passion, baby. Go do what you want in life. Don't let other adults stop you. You tell them off.
Wow.
And now we're shocked that we have young adults who see themselves as equals inside the corporate world, inside academia, inside the world. They see themselves as equal to those who have 40 years experience.
Wow, this is a great conversation. I wish we had time for more. Brad, thank you so much for being on the show. Can you tell our viewing audience how they can get a hold of you?
Just Google Liquid Leadership and you'll find me easily. Yeah.
I could talk to you forever.
Thank you.
This has been Leah Woodford with SmartFem and Friends. Thanks for watching.
Thank you.